Our next speaker is Takehito Sugawara. He's a graduate student in the Department of Kinesiology, and today he'll be discussing how we might transition from a teacher-centered classroom to a student-centered classroom in kinesiology.
What is the most exciting part of college? Is it making new friends? Learning something new? Or just having a party? Everyone finds a different value in college. But how about not exciting part of college? As one of the teaching associate here at Shisen, hopefully I don't hear you saying a lecture is not very exciting. But I think I have to agree with you, because when I was taking a lecture, sometimes, only sometimes, I look like this. Yes, some lectures are not very exciting, so I started my research to make an exercise physiology lecture more exciting by introducing student-centered learning. This method is different from a traditional teacher-centered learning. The biggest difference is the main speaker. In a teacher-centered learning, the teacher is the main speaker, of course, but student-centered learning, students are the main speaker. So basically, what I did in my study was to compare two different lecture styles in exercise physiology course. I asked my advisor to teach two sections of the same course differently, and to validate the difference, I stayed in the classroom with two stopwatches and measured the amount of time the teacher and the student spent talking during the lecture. The student in the students in the learning group spent a significantly longer time compared to the student in the teachers in the learning group, so we successfully changed the teaching style. In the students in the learning group, we converted the lecture from in-class delivery to online delivery. Students were asked to watch those online lectures before they came to the actual lecture, and during the lecture time, we created small groups and asked them to work together to solve new questions using the knowledge they learned from the online lecture. In this way, we expected the student to understand the basic content with the online lecture and to develop the ability to apply their knowledge with the in-class activity. Based on the result of past studies of student-centered learning, we expected to have three positive outcomes. Better grades were expected because students can spend a longer time actually solving the question. The ability to apply their knowledge is very important because that is what they need at actual tests. But those abilities are hard to develop just by listening to a lecture. Higher positive emotion was also expected because other researchers found students enjoyed interacting with other students more than listening to a lecture. A larger scope of attention was also expected because we believe seeing a bigger picture will be ideal for learning exercise physiology. We believe so because exercise physiology is not just memorizing the fact. If you try to learn exercise physiology just by remembering the fact, it might look like this. For those who are struggling exercise physiology, it might even look like this. There are tons of information they have to remember without seeing any connection, but that's not a really good idea. There are stories, there are connections, so it is very important for us to understand the meaningful connection between each dot. That's why we expected to have a larger scope of attention in this group. Again, these are the three positive outcomes we expected to have. Let's take a look at the actual result. Sadly, we did not have the result as we expected. They had same grade as the teachers and learning group, and they had a less positive emotion. They did have a larger scope of attention, but because it did not happen with the better grade, our hypothesis was not supported. So, should we say this method is ineffective? We should not use that. Before we make any conclusion, let's think about why we had those results. First thing is about our student attitude toward homework. We could not successfully change their attitude toward homework. There was no significant difference in the hours they spent studying on their own outside the classroom. Watching the online lecture should take a longer period of time than reading a textbook, but that was not the case. That might be because we simply asked them to do too much. We could not successfully motivate them to do study outside the classroom, so the new question for the future research is how we should motivate them to study on their own. We wanted to know more about why we had those results. We conducted a survey at the end of the semester. We found two more explanations about these results. First thing is about the timing of the intervention. We introduced this method in the middle of the semester, but that was not a very good idea. We should have introduced this method before students made any expectation about how the subject would be taught. The sudden switch of teaching style might have caused students to think, I don't know what happened to the teacher, but she suddenly stopped teaching. So we should have introduced this method from the beginning of the semester. And one more thing is about a small portion of the teachers and the learning. It is natural for students to have questions even after they watch the online lecture. So having a small portion of mini lecture before the in-class activity should help students to get more ready for the in-class activity. So based on the result of my study, it might be too early for us to make conclusion that students learning is ineffective or not. But it is very important for you to make your lecture more exciting to help students like those guys. So when you're thinking about making your lecture more exciting by introducing students and learning, there are 3 things to remember. First thing is you have to think about how to motivate them to study outside the classroom. Second thing is you should introduce this method from the beginning of the semester, that is before student makes any expectation about how the subject would be taught. The last thing is small portion of teachers and learning should be helpful. I would like to say thank you very much for all the population, all the participants in my study. I really appreciate your time answering the questionnaire. This study will definitely help other researchers, other instructors, and the future students who are going to learn exercise physiology. Thank you very much.
Thank you, TK. It's something that as a student, I would often be that kid that was asleep in the back of the classroom during a science lecture. As an instructor, what was really helpful to think about is we often have these great data and we know that we want to build upon the learning we do with our students, but I don't think we think enough about implementation and timing and things like that. So thank you so much for breaking that down in a way that is very usable for folks that want to be better teachers. So now we have some questions from our judges.
I wanted to ask about the design of your study. Because you mentioned that you implemented the change in the middle of the class.
Yes.
Did you use the first half of the class as the teacher-centered method and the second half of the class as the student-centered, or were you comparing different classes?
We use the same course. I asked my advisor to teach 2 sections of the exact same course. The first class was, both sections were taught mostly with the teachers and learning, a little bit mix of students and learning, but mostly with the teachers and learning. So only teaching style, but one section was switched in the middle of the semester.
So to me, it's like a quasi-experimental design. Have you actually compared the cumulative GPA prior to the class of the 2 sessions?
So your question is about the measurement I did in my lecture?
No, it's just so you didn't see any significant change in the grades between the 2 pedagogical approaches, right?
You mean like from the first part of introducing students learning and at the end of the data collection? Is that what you're trying to ask?
Yeah, I was just saying that my understanding is that, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you implement the student learning approach in one session.
Correct.
And then the traditional teacher-centered in the other session.
Yes.
Right, and then compare the grades at the end of the semester of the 2 sessions.
Yes, that is correct.
So it looks like from the slides that there was no significant change in terms of the grades between the 2 sessions, right?
Yes, there was no significant difference.
I'm sorry, not change, yes.
No, there's no difference of grades between 2 sections, even though we expected students in the learning group would have better grade compared to the other section.
Yeah, what I was asking is that because the 2 sessions consist of somewhat different students, have you looked at their cumulative GPA or other academic performance before taking the class to see if they are kind of equivalent to each other?
Yes, we did take demographic questions, and there was no significant difference except one variable. They have 2 options, whether they can solve the workbook question or going to like other mini lecture. And the trend of which one they chose was a little bit different. But other than that, GPA, age, gender, or anything else, that was the same.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as an instructor, my experience is that it takes like double your time to modify your instruction, even if that means that students will do most of the work in the class. But teacher behind the stage do a lot more planning in terms of make that happen successfully. So I definitely encourage you to continue this exploration of the innovative approach. And yeah, it takes a few years, I think, to really get there. My
Thank you.
experience is that, yeah.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, TK.